Hi everyone, my name is Suma and I'm here with Guy Harriman, who created the Ajna Light to help people explore their connection with the wisdom of the universe. Guy graduated from Manchester University, UK in electronics in 1979. Guy worked for 23 years as a chip designer in Silicon Valley, including 4 years with Steve Jobs at Next. He then worked at Cisco Systems for 6 years, leaving in 2000, along with 3 patents from his work in Silicon Valley. Guy has also been a healer and yogi for over 30 years. He lives in Thailand and built his Lanna Yoga Healing Centre. Welcome, Guy.
Thank you, Suma. That was an excellent summary.
I'm so fortunate to meet you because it's very rare to meet someone who has this mix of tech background and mysticism.
Well, yeah, the funny thing is it used to be completely standard. I mean, even going back to the Greeks, when I was a child, Pythagoras was my hero. And, you know, he was a music therapist, a healer, he was vegan, and yet he did all the mathematics and brought them from Egypt. So he was a mystic. It actually took him 20 years to be trained in Egypt and bring the ancient Egyptian wisdom to the West, as well as being a numerologist. So, you know, the age of specialism is an unfortunate side effect of materialism as a religion, sort of world religion, unfortunately. But we're all capable of everything. And most of the things that we limit ourselves to are because of conditioning imposed on us and accepted by us, which, in my opinion, is a shame, because if you give yourself permission to be who you really are, all sorts of amazing things happen.
Do you think that separation between tech and mysticism is starting to that gap is starting to get closer now?
Yes, it's everything is cyclical, and you know, in yoga we talk about the yogas, and we're moving out of the Iron Age, the Kali Yoga, and into the technology age, the Silver Age, before the Gold Age. And so it's interesting that technology is so powerful, but technology itself is neutral. A spade can be deeply spiritual as a tool, if you think about it. You know, if you dedicate yourself to your biodynamic farm, like Rudolf Steiner says, and you create the farm as an organism using your spade, then that spade is a deeply spiritual tool. It's connecting you to nature. On the other hand, if you use your spade to hit your neighbor over the head, it's not particularly spiritual.
Can you give us a background about Ajna Light and what are the benefits of using Ajna Light?
Yeah, well, there's, I think most of your listeners will know that the Ajna chakra is the 6th chakra, and it is the connection to knowledge, knowledge in the universe, in the Akasha. So you can call it the third eye, many, many terms for it. In Taoism, it's the celestial eye. And without getting sidetracked too much, the domination of government control, you know, starting with, say, the Nazis and moving on to most governments nowadays, involves disabling people. It's actually creating hive mentality. And the most important way of doing that is to close down your own insight. So the Ajna chakra and the pineal gland that's associated with it, which is a vestigial eye, they do have, you could say really, fluoridation is an issue, vaccination is an issue, junk food, all the things that people accept as normal now, but were totally unheard of 100 years ago, have disconnected us from nature. So when we live in harmony with nature, like say the original people in Australia, they have a very great telepathic sense. And, you know, it's well known that one of them will use the bull roarer and you can hear it from miles and miles away. And then they know, it's like, that's like the phone call, like when you rang me on Skype, the dring. And then they tune into the telepathic message. Okay, meet me at this Billabong, the watering hole in Billabong, in say 2 weeks. And they both show up at the same time. So that synchronistic way of living is actually our nature. The disconnected way of artificial, insulated, insular mentality and belief systems and material goals are actually deeply unnatural. So the Ajna Light uses entrainment to reopen the possibility of a deeper connection, and it works through the visual cortex. Dreams are really a DMT experience. When we sleep and then go into a REM cycle, the lungs actually have the largest amount of DMT in the body, and the more rapid breathing when you're in a REM period causes the release of the DMT. DMT is natural in all the cells in our body and most beings' bodies, and it comes from melatonin. There's a cascade from tryptophan, melatonin to DMT, but it activates on the visual cortex and gives us visionary insights, you know, while dreaming. Now, the Ajna Light, the neurophysiology of the Ajna Light is such that it activates dreaming while we're awake. So it turns the corticomedulla region of the brain, which is like the switch from internal to external vision, and this process called melanopsin going through the SCN and then through the pineal tract. So, I mean, there's real physiology about it, and of course, normally our DMT is inhibited during the day because it's not such a good idea to be tripping the whole time, unless you're a stoner. But actually, you know, if you want to function, so normally there's a natural inhibitor. And ayahuasca, as I'm sure you know, works with the BCAP, which is the vine, it's the inhibitor of the viridans, which has the DMT. Now that exogenous form of DMT, like Bupo, Virensis, or, you know, Sapo, or many, there are a number of forms of hallucinogens. The trouble with them is really you have to surrender to them. I mean, you can be gone for a day, and if something emotional that you haven't dealt with, or some karmic issue comes up, it can be a very traumatic experience, and you know, many people talk about that. But the beauty of doing an endogenous spiritual journey, because that's what DMT is, you know, it's a spirit molecule, it gives you deeper insight outside your conditioned mind. And as Aldous Huxley said, that's opening the doors of perception. But, you know, you can decide how long you want to do it. It turns itself. Your journey's done. You're back. And you have the insights still vivid because you're conscious at the time.
Is pineal gland, is it same as third eye, or is there a difference between these two terms?
Well, it is a real vestigial eye, and amphibians such as salamanders have a functioning third eye pointing upwards. They can actually see the skull is open, and of course for a baby, you know, the skull's not joined, so they're getting information there. And it's tiny. But there's a really bizarre correspondence, between the ductless glands in the brain and ventricle system and the genital system. So the pituitary actually looks like a pair of testicles. The pineal obviously looks like a penis, but a very small one. And the hypothalamus looks like a vagina or prostate. And they're all lined up in the same way. You know, there's one pineal and one penis, but all the other parts of the body are doubled. You know, 2 eyes, 2 ears, you know, 2 nostrils, all the way down. So something's going on there. You know, there's some... Biology tells us something by metaphor, and creativity is a sexual action. Creativity involves the imagination, the magus. In physics, you'd see it as the vortex, the precessing hyperboloid in the center of the toroid of the magnetic field. Now, that's maybe too technical, so we don't need to go down any of those directions, but I just want to point that there's an absolute correspondence in nature between physics, biology, spirituality, and the ancient traditions, because all of this ancient wisdom was well known and was known as science way before control freaks came along and turned it into religion and dogma.
What are the benefits of activating pineal gland?
Well, as I said, the imagination, creativity, and insight. You know, nowadays, it used to be cool to have a good memory and to read lots of books and stuff like that. And it's still useful in conversation, but in reality, Google has knowledge. I mean, knowledge is worthless. Totally worthless now. It's been devalued to zero. And that's a good thing, because it's, instead of just the Vatican having a load of secret knowledge, a lot of stuff is available. Of course, there's a lot of junk, but the discerning eye can turn knowledge into wisdom. And the pineal, like the celestial eye, is the gateway of that. But the actual knowledge of wisdom is in the heart, the emperor in the heart. I call it the golden tabernacle of the soul.
Do you think there are some more abilities like precognition or some psychic abilities that open up with pineal gland?
Yeah, that's well documented. The interesting thing in my experience is that it's so cool that anything you grasp for eludes you. The ego and the illusion of the mind, particularly the idea that we are mental beings and everything has to be, you know, described in that way and understood through the mind, is Maya. It's actually illusory, and the more you grasp for it, the more the ego will make up a bigger and bigger story. And of course, the story is very entertaining. But the key thing is, what happens in your last breath as you die? That's the only important thing in your whole journey. It's not how many Rolls Royces you had or, you know, anything like that. How big a house you had or any of those things. It's actually, are you at peace the time that your second huge endogenous DMT experience happens, which is your death. And of course you see the near-death experiences, people report the tunnel of light, and that's actually exactly what many people experience and report under the Ajna Light.
When I research on these topics, I do find information about Ajna Chakra, but not much about the crown chakra. What's the difference between those two energy fields?
Okay. Well, it's the vortex. It's something I'm working on a lot more in my practice these days. The vortex is, Rudolf Steiner called it counter space. It's the connection to the etheric field, which Tesla, Steinmetz, Faraday, even J.J. Thomson, the discoverer of the electron, still maintained there was an ether. The etheric field is stillness. And as an electronics engineer, I understand that in field theory, there is no space and time in the field. They're just present everywhere. That's the definition of it. And in our modern metaphors, we talk about a black hole, where a black hole is the centripetal vortex. You can actually see it, as matter goes to a black hole. But a black hole is present in every atom. So I like to feel, and I won't get too far off the rails, I hope, but I like to feel that I can steer the black hole that defines my being, my plasma body, to the center of my heart. So the Sahasrara chakra is the opening of Yang Qi, which is centrifugal. And Yang is enfolding. If you think of a sine wave, Yang goes from light to darkness, from universal energy to the seed. And then Yin is the nurturing force. Yin comes from Muladhara chakra and generates, as the feminine principle does, generates back up to maximum Yang. So there's this cycle. Walter Russell said, if you understand one sine wave cycle, you understand everything. So we don't often think in 3D, but when we look at a sine wave in 2D, actually it's more important to see it in the vortex form. So that's the crown chakra. Now, the vision, the observer, if you like, in that pole, is the Ajna chakra. The still point, which is where wisdom is, the observer, the real spiritual observer is in the heart, if you're in balance. And then, the creating centripetal vortex comes from Muladhara. And that's, if you look at a black hole and then you look at the white hole and the spiral galaxies, they're all showing that vortexing behavior.
Does the Ajna light, does it also affect the crown chakra opening, or is it mainly focused around Ajna?
That's a very interesting question. And the answer is it works on all the chakras, depending on the frequencies you program. So the key technology in the Ajna light is a thing I called ILST, so little I, and then capital LST. It was actually a sort of thank you to Steve Jobs, with all the iPhones and the iMac and blah, blah, blah. But I invited Steve to help me designing the Ajna light because I was in a lot of meetings with him at Next, and he would, the software engineers have been working like 3 nights in a row making this demo version for the next step. And he said, that's no good. Go back, do it again. Because he was an artist and a perfectionist. So visualizing him with me caused me to rewrite the interface 5 times. But it was really, really necessary because, I'm a chip designer, did a lot of software, particularly Perl and simulations, and I would generate I/O structures, and automate says testing and da-da-da. But, mainly I was a hardware person. So I had to learn a lot of software because I just got this download literally in 3 hours about how to make the Ajna light. I was gardening here in my healing centre after this Austrian device called the Lucia light came to my healing centre, and I could see its potential, but it was a hypnagogic device. and they were like the leading edge of research. But I do zero research, so I was literally just gardening the next day, and I was told the LEDs I had to use, which I had no idea if they existed, that I had to use jQuery, a Wi-Fi hotspot, no idea how to do that, and a web app, and sell through an ambassador model. So, oh, okay. So, you know, I'd retired by that point. This is 2013. It's been 11 years. And in the meantime, I'd been to ordain a monk. I built my healing center. I'd left California. So, but I just trust. When I'm told something from upstairs, I trust and I do it. And so that's how the Ajna Light came. And I'd never made a circuit board before, because I'd always done chip design, so I got that done too. But literally 3 months later, 3 months of 3 o'clock in the mornings, I was looking at my first prototype and closed my eyes. And I got this very powerful feeling, and I know how this is working. But I broke all the rules in the research about what you do for light and sound. I didn't even know that.
What was your favorite experience with Ajna Light?
Actually, it was, I think it'd been about July 2014. I was about to go to Dali in China in 3 days, and I was beginning to do what the other lights do, which is write preset journeys. And it was deeply unsatisfactory to me. I wrote one which I enjoyed, which was called Schumann, and it was really, because Schumann's such an important frequency, the 8 Hertz, it was a guided journey through Delta, Schumann, Alpha, Gamma, and then back down. And that one, loads and loads of people still use that preset. It's funny, it's like one of the favorite ones people use. But I was thinking, no, I don't want to be designing, and because I actually, one of the first things I did was to write a composer, a light sequence composer, so I could compose journeys, but I only composed that one. And then I was thinking, that doesn't feel right. So every morning, for the last 20 years, I do my practice, and it's typically a 3-hour practice. So I was doing my Qigong, and I remember turning from the north to the west, and I saw this mixer, like a sound mixer. Because I used to do a lot of music synthesizer building and, all that stuff, a lot of music. And when I looked at it, it had the different brainwave frequencies on it. And I suddenly realized what I was being told to do, to build a constrained stochastics algorithmic generator of journeys. Now that sounds complicated, but actually what it means is randomness is the key to creativity. Entropy is funneled through the imagination into negentropy, into order. And then negentropy through Shiva, that's the Shakti process. Shiva, the destroyer, takes order and returns it. That's the great cycle of the universe, and it's a great cycle in our lives. We think we're doing really well, and then our partner breaks up with us, or our car breaks down, or whatever it is, So, constraining chaos through intention, so, that's why I call it intentional light self-therapy, and setting, okay, I want this much gamma, I want this much lambda, and I want the events to be this long. It gives you the capability, literally in a few seconds, to design a unique journey that's based on what you've got in mind. And Harvard proved with the PAIR project that our minds control random number generators. They've done lots of studies on that. And before 9/11, for example, they had 42, I think it was, of the PAIR machines around the world. There was a huge pickup in negentropy 2 or 3 days before, which is your thing about predicting, can we predict? Precognition is a real thing. So I'm using the same process. I'm using it in a personal way, but the Ajna Light's really for therapists who, work with a lot of people. It's not something that I recommend just an individual buy. It's the Pineal Light, in particular the new glasses and what I call the rods of Ramesses, which I might show you actually for fun, if they're going inside. They are what I recommend for individuals. The Ajna Light is a very deep device, and as a therapist, you can use it with any therapy you like. I use it with Reiki. I've done it with craniosacral, crystal healing. Many of the modalities that I do, and I know other people do it with sound therapy, for example. It's amazing. So there you go.
And what's
Be careful what you ask me, by the way, because if you ask me a question, you might get too long an answer.
No, we have all the time.
Okay.
What's the difference between the experience you get under Ajna Light versus some people that talk about DMT experiences?
Okay. Our consciousness, every religion talks about this, comes from light. Okay. The informational field, the carrier is light. DNA, our so-called junk DNA is actually, the Russians have proved it, it's a linguistic, it's like a poem or a song. If you analyze the base order in the junk DNA, it has patterns like words, and it's actually reprogrammed by light. In fact, UV light around 400 nanometers, I believe it's around there, 300 nanometers, I think. That's generated by the oscillation of DNA, and our cells communicate through light.
So
that's the dominant form of communication. It's not through nerve impulses; they're far too slow. The light, when we connect to spirit, we receive the light. Now, what's the first name of Allah? Do you know it?
No.
You're very close. Nur. Nur. So Nur means light, which is really beautiful. And plant consciousness is beautiful, but it's very different. Pure light is pure yang. That's its nature. It's coming in from the universe, from the collective field. The yin energy is nature as it's exposed on the planet. So plants and animals, like the frog, like Sapo and everything, their consciousness is superimposed on the DMT, because you're getting an introduction to what it's like to be in that level of consciousness, which is beautiful and powerful, but it's not human consciousness. One's not better than the other, but they're complementary. They're the opposite. So, for example, I've had a number of experiences, and they're gateway opening experiences, like ayahuasca and LSD and Sapo and things like that. I don't go seeking them. When they feel in harmony, I will work with them, because I want to have as open a connection to the universe as possible, not just to be constrained into my conditioned self, right? And that's where the plant consciousness is very good. Mother Ayahuasca will point out your ego stuff, and I'm sure you've heard many people talk about it. they think, oh, I'm really cool. I'm going to Peru. I'm going to have this great journey, and then I'm going to be super cool, and all my friends will look up, whatever. There's a whole, I think, misguided entertainment factor around sacred medicine. The indigenous people understand what medicine is. It's a serious tool that you undertake in a disciplined way. If you have no discipline, you have no spirituality, you just have ego.
And I've noticed that sometimes some people think that will solve all their problems, and that's the reason they pursue it. And that's not the right reason. To me, that doesn't feel like that's the right reason to go for it.
The irony is it's taking the most unnatural approach to life, which is the AMA, take a pill and fix everything. Watch a movie and your problems will go away. Eat this junk food and you'll feel happy. It's the manifestation of laziness when it comes down to it. I'm sorry, but that's true. It's lazy thinking and irresponsibility. And it's up to, people are able to do whatever they want. And they will fool themselves that entertainment is spirituality. But it's not. Entertainment is hard work. But it's hard work based on self-love. The problem is babies come, in a neutral way. They're programmed to disconnect. They're programmed to be self-negating, to be reactive. And that's the journey of the soul particularly into our modern culture. There's, very little nature for the soul to feel at peace with. So in this unnatural world, all stimulation disconnects the consciousness even further. Now, to my mind, the old ways, the disciplined ways, are the real way of coming back to be ready for your last breath, to have a very peaceful and joyful last breath. So, it's not a good idea. If you watch Steve's last video where he's in intensive care and all the green lights, and he's talking about regretting he didn't spend more time with his family. Steve was a very wonderful man, and I lived down the street from him in Palo Alto, and interacted with him a lot. But his journey was not an easy journey, let's put it that way. And he was, I would say, quite tortured in many ways, like a tortured artist. Achieved huge things, but at a great personal cost. So I guess, people call me a high-tech monk, but, my nature is really a monk. The abbot of the Wat is a Thai monastery, where I went. First time he ever saw me, I had long hair, I hadn't cut my hair for 16 years, yogi, da-da-da. He said, you have to shave your head. I thought, what? No, I'm not doing that. But literally the day after we put the last tile down in my healing centre, it was Songkran, which is the Thai New Year, my birthday, April 13th, 2010. And Dr. Rampa, my assistant, wanted to go with her girls, who are my adopted daughters, and they were going to become meshis or nuns. And he said to me, now's your time to become a monk. I was like, now I want to go back. And he said, you can leave if you want. But the last two people who left were in serious car accidents when they had work to do. So that, in Thai, it's called the Samlo, the three worlds. There's places that are really demonic that I cannot sleep in. And there are other places like the Golden Cave, which is the literal name of it, Tampon, that are really beautiful. And the Japanese pavilion, that's really beautiful too. But that's reality. You know, you have three worlds. And so I chose what was really uncomfortable to me. I was basically imprisoned, in a sense. I wasn't allowed to leave. But he let me do my yoga and my qigong, which is totally illegal for a monk. But he knew that, and I've seen my past lives too as a monk, so he knew that. And so that really accelerated me working on the traditional path. Now the Ajna Light, and the Pyro Light too, and other, spiritual technology like mala beads, statues, things that create sacred space for you. The point is to again open this door of perception so you see what's really important. And to my mind, let's just put it this way. Serotonin is a much more valuable hormone than dopamine. But we live in a dopamine-addicted culture. Dopamine is, nobody says I want to be joyful. I do. I want to be joyful. I don't want to be happy. Who cares about being happy? It's ridiculous. Happiness is dopamine. Oh, I just got a new car. Okay, I'm happy for a week. Oh, but somebody else got it. Oh, no, I'm not happy anymore. It acts like insulin. The more dopamine you get, the more your dopamine receptors diminish, the more you need. So greed never finishes. Dopamine generates greed. Serotonin is joy and peace. Peace is stillness. Stillness is source. Now you can be in the most unhappy circumstances, like say Nelson Mandela in solitary confinement, and have an absolutely blissful experience, because that's where joy leads to bliss. Bliss is connection. Happiness is reactive. It's totally dependent on the outside world.
That's a very good difference you explained between Ajna Light and DMT. Apart from Ajna Light being legal.
Yes, although Dennis McKenna, every single time I see him, because you probably know I put him on the Ajna Light, and he realized it was the DMT thing. He says, "Oh, they're going to make LEDs illegal." He always says that. It's really funny. But yeah, so far LEDs are legal, and and you can decide how far you go. What's really interesting to me is that people who use the Ajna Light a lot, after the visual journeys, which are really can be very profound for people, everyone goes into this nirvana, the darkness. And there are videos on ajnalight.com from Ocean, for example. She would come over here, she was testing the light for me, and she'd do an hour journey, and she would literally be out. Out of body, in the void, not seeing anything, not hearing anything, not feeling anything, and come back a minute before the journey was finished. And when you're in that stillness, that's when your whole being experiences deep, deep peace. And that's something amazing you can do with the Ajna Light. The other thing is, that's wonderful, you can even use the same stimulation, same exact music, same sequence, and you'll get a different journey each time, which shows it's not hypnagogic.
And it's different for different people.
Different, but also different for you. Because it's a mirror of your consciousness. It's not, because it's light. Human consciousness is light. Whereas what tends to happen with plant medicines, like if you do a lot of them, it will tend to repeat and try and reinforce the same thing because you're not getting it.
What if someone gets addicted to that experience?
It's inherently non-addictive. I've never seen anyone addicted to... Oh, there's one funny story. Do you want to hear a funny story?
Yes.
I better not name the organization, but it's extremely big. And it was a guru in India who started it. And this man who's up in Canada, he was one of the founders of it, like 30 or 40 years ago. And it's a huge meditation thing. I mean, you know, millions of followers worldwide. And so he said, oh, I'm going to spread this into our community and just send me one and da-da-da-da-da. So everything was going fine. And then he sent his light back. Oh, it stopped working. So 2 LEDs had gone. I thought, oh, okay, that's strange. So I repaired it and sent it back. It was working fine. 2 weeks later, the same 2 LEDs went. And I said, what are you doing? Oh, my partner and I are using it together 6 hours a day on 100%. And I've seen this happen. The lights will break down. Some electronics has a sort of consciousness. I tell people to name their lights, you know, so they have a loving relationship. But honestly, people are out of harmony, their lights will break down. It's very weird. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was the funniest case of somebody who, but generally it's self-limiting, because once you've got it, it's inside you, so you don't need the tool. That's why I recommend that therapists use the Ajna Light, because a therapist can help many, many, many people. You know, they charge $1 a minute, and they pay for the light in 100 hours, but they built the experience and the expertise to facilitate people using the light. And so I think, you know, one light therapist can touch 1,000 people. And I know people who are like that, you know. Diana in Australia, I think she's had something like 3,000 hours or more of using the light. She does group sessions every week with meditation, and you know, it's amazing. So it's a tool that you can take as deeply as you want. And the Paralight, on the other hand, is the complement to that. So the Ajna Light works with Saraswara Chakra down to Anahata, so crown chakra to the heart. The Paralight works from Muladhara up to the heart, so it's totally body-based. It activates the 3 dantians simultaneously, and uses three fractal, very important 5 fractal frequencies: 2 hertz delta, 8 hertz Schumann, which is the heart, and then 40 hertz gamma. At 40 hertz, when the left and right brain hemispheres of the brain are integrated and coherent, then you have a 40 hertz signal from the back to the front of the brain. It's easy to pick up. Just like heart coherence, this is brain coherence. So it's in training those 3 things: serotonin, 2 hertz delta, balance, harmony, Schumann, 8 hertz. And as you know, the planet Schumann has been shooting up to harmonics because of the Van Allen belt decreasing, and you know, the yellow sun turning to the white sun, and a lot of things like that. So there's a lot of disharmony in the world because people are not getting their connection to Schumann. And every astronaut sent out has to have a Schumann frequency generator. You know that.
Can you repeat the last part you said?
Every astronaut sent out from the planet is accompanied by a Schumann frequency generator. Did you know that?
No. That's very interesting.
The first Soyuz astronaut, he went out, everything was going fine. After 2 weeks, suddenly he couldn't function. He couldn't remember anything. He literally couldn't function. They had to send a second astronaut to rescue him. So the first astronaut came back. It took them 3 years to work out what had gone on. He'd been out of the Schumann resonance. The memory is stored in the magnetic field that's resonant with Schumann, and he lost it. I mean, he literally couldn't speak, he couldn't eat, he couldn't do anything. That's how important Schumann is to us. So when it gets disturbed, it's very disturbing for our physiology. And so that's why I have Schumann in there. And the Pyrolite I use 12 to 16 hours a day. It's not addictive, I don't have to have it, but my body really likes it. I sleep with it every night. I was on the computer just now, I had it in the back of my pants, and it's really helped me shift consciousness from a body-based way.
Has Steve Jobs, did he ever share any of his mystic experiences with you?
He was a very private person, but, he went to India from Palo Alto High School. He was with Chris Ann Brennan. And Chris Ann and I were really, really close. We went to the same yoga class. I used to do crystal work and energy work with her. And actually, she was the only person when I do crystal work with her and I was running energy, we'd see the same vision at the same time. And so she was the mother of Lisa. They both went to India for a year. And I used to spend quite a lot of time with her. Well, Steve was 6 weeks older than me. We were, and both vegan and everything like that. And so, I don't know, but Chris Ann said that Steve, she and I were in the same soul family. But for example, when I talked to Steve about my daughter going to a Waldorf school, because her mother was, my ex was third generation Waldorf, didn't want to know about it. He was just focused on work.
How was it like to work with him?
Can you imagine a frustrated artist whose tools are bent and, the brush isn't got enough hairs on it and things like that? Can you imagine that's Steve? People were his tools. And he had the brightest people on the planet, basically. He had, like, the whole of Stanford University's electronic music group with Julia Smith. He had the best compiler writers. It was a very interesting story how I ended up there, but that's another story. But anyway, there's some really, really, really bright people. And everyone warned me, don't go there. I actually took a pay cut from the UK to go and work at Next. And he got furious and crazily angry if anything was slightly wrong. But we used to call it the reality distortion field. Because the way extroverts are, they'll make all sorts of commitments and blah, 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 it's this, that, and the other, because it's just their way of externalizing their thought process. So 1 minute, he'd be pointing this direction. Literally a second later, he'd be pointing the opposite. If you were still supporting his previous thing, you were a complete bozo and he yelled at you. So that was the reality distortion field. So it was fascinating to watch him because he was extremely bright, very clear intellect, and he understood. But he never once shouted at me. And I felt he was always like a piranha. If you're not bleeding, the piranha's not going to attack you. And for whatever reason, I guess, maybe because I'd done yoga already for quite a long time at that point, 10 years, I'd already established some sort of, calmness. But, I used to go every Wednesday at 5 o'clock, I would go to my yoga class with Larry Haslett in Palo Alto. And that was it. That was my commitment to myself. And often there was some crazy chaos deadline. I had to get a new rep of the chipper. I had to be there. I'm leaving. I never compromised on that. And so I guess people don't like it, but they respect you if you are strong in standing up for what you believe. If you're a good person. If you're just an asshole, you don't care and you take the person out and shoot them. But Steve was a good person. He actually was a very, I would say, he was the wrathful face of love. Yeah. Yeah, the wrathful. You know, the Tibetan deities, they have the beneficent and the wrathful aspects. Like, say, Green Tara. She has a beautiful side like Saraswati, and then she has a demonic side. You know, you can say Kali.
Did he share his view?
Not with anyone. He was very closed. I mean, I'd love to talk to him about Zen, and he carried it, but he, as I said, work was him being an artist, creating something beautiful. And next was the biggest catastrophe of any startup in financial terms up to that point. So Steve managed to finagle $300 million out of Canon because he got the laser jet, actually it was the laser printer, into Apple, you know, for the Mac. And so they believed him. He'd always say in company meetings, we're on the runway, we're about to take off. You know, 3 months later, we're on the runway, so we were joking that the runway was getting longer and longer as time went on. But what next created the web objects, the beginning of the internet, Windows. You know, Microsoft took 3 of the they bought 100 of Next workstations and copied Next Step, made a horrible mess of it. Next Step was beautiful. Keith Olds did these amazing icons. And it was all seamless and beautiful. There's never been an operating system like Next Step because it was done from the ground up. Really, really integrated. Okay, this is 1990. There was an app that a friend of mine, Joe Becker, had written, The Next Step. I could click on it. It was for booking a conference room in Next. I could go into it, expand out to the world, fly to London, go down into the office in London, into the conference room, and book the time I wanted. 1990. So that was what Steve did. And then, you know, you learn through failure. We all do. My one and only book is called The Power of Failure. Because if there's no failure, we're living in a delusory world. So, Maya's illusion, we all share that. Failure is the interface between delusion and illusion, if you think of it carefully. Failure is that gateway, because if you think you're successful, and it's actually a failure in the Mayan world, and you don't know it, you're psychotic. Not a good idea. So accepting failure and learning from it is the whole key to growth, and that's why I think we come as souls to the planet.
One subject I wanted to discuss with you about some of these experiences was the geometric patterns that you get to see in these experiences. Why do you think we see them? Do you think it's a kind of a language? I'm trying to understand the meaning of those geometric patterns, because so many people talk about seeing them, whether it's meditation or in dream states.
Yeah, actually it's an entirely understandable side effect of neurophysiology. In the 1960s, they discovered a part of the visual cortex. They called it the ice cube. and it's actually for stereoscopic vision and for depth perception. Well, that's depth perception, but also from orientation. And it's let's see, it's 40 by 80, no, 20 by 40 by 80 neurons, and the optic nerve feeds into it, and it's a regular pattern. It's a lattice structure, and there was a Culver in the 1920s was interested in why people actually near-death experience people, but also people having mystic experiences, or even just somebody doing this in front of the light, would see the same patterns. And he defined it down to 4 things: as a honeycomb, a spiral, and 2 other things. But everything you see is a mix of those 2. Mandalas and all the things we see, the spiritual experience, actually all relate to that structure. And they have meaning for us because it's a common part of our neurophysiology. In other words, every culture, every human being has that same structure. And an experience like peyote, that gives you pretty good ones, LSD, they're all neurotransmitters. That's the crazy thing. DMT is a neurotransmitter. It's not turning on the third eye in the literal sense. It's making very bizarre cross connections between parts of the brain that normally don't talk to each other. And it's activating this part of the system too. You know, for some people it's very auditory. They'll hear ghosts and, blah, blah, blah. Other people, the parts that are activated will be visual. Other people, it might be deep subconscious, which I think is where the going into stillness comes about, the really quiet, inner, peaceful part of our being. But, yeah, it can be understood on that neurological level, but what's more important is the fact it's a common language, and it shows up in mandalas and sacred art, ayahuasca art. Everyone is seeing the same thing, so it actually doesn't matter that but it's really cool to me that it's a crystal. It's like this 3D crystal structure of neurons. It's the only part of the brain that's laid out in this lattice. Crystals are interfaces to consciousness.
Now, is the meaning, like, let's say if I see Metatron cube patterns in my dream and you see it in your dream, would the meaning be the same, or is it different for each one? Would I have an individual meaning different from what it means for you?
That's a very interesting question, because there's a cultural aspect to that. I mean, I guess you could imagine a culture in which, say, cones of ice cream were labeled with Metatron cubes and stuff like that, or whatever. That like sacred, what we call sacred geometry, was used to mark banal objects. Mm-hmm. And I think you would relearn through your cultural patterning, and you'd misplace the original ones. But if you have no conditioning around it, then it has its pure meaning. Apparently, a friend of mine told me this recently. So this, A-OK used to be this. And somebody, for a joke, as a meme, said it means white power. Or it literally is started trolling it. And now people think, oh, anyone who's doing this is saying white power. It's totally crazy. But that shows you how cultural conditioning can replace symbols. But I think I suspect that if you have a deep enough experience, the more high-level transient conditioning goes away, and you get into semiotics or symbols which are universal, like the tree of life or the kookaburras, the dragon biting its own tail, or the rose, the beautiful rose structure, the practicality of DNA seen end on.
Because you're in a state where you don't have those cultural conditionings anymore.
Exactly.
You transcend that.
Yeah. Once you go deep enough. But if you're just having an entertainment experience, like, I don't know, just ketamine or whatever, I haven't tried, I don't like any of the chemical stuff, but I suspect you might get nightmares based on conditioning more. But nature would tend to provide you, I think, more meaningful, commonly meaningful metaphors that would have that showed up in cave drawings as well as in, something more recent.
And this one shape, tetrahedron, why do you think that's kind of like a significant?
Well, I'll just tell you my perspective. It's you understand that when a sperm enters an ovum, there's a flash of light. It's actually being measured. You've heard about that.
I haven't heard about that, but
it's really fascinating. They've taken a petri dish full of ova and then introduced sperm into them, and literally it goes flash, 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 flash. And the actual mechanism of the light is through zinc in some way. What is going on there at the instant of conception, I believe, is the connection of spirit through light. It makes perfect sense that it would happen. And also, if you take a spectrophotometer, you can actually measure, it's about typically 8 to 12 hours, as the Tibetans say, after you die, that the soul leaves the body. Again, you see a flash of light that's really measurable. So that instant of conception, the instant of death, when you take the seed cell and you multiply it, you've got 2, and then 4, you've got the tetrahedral structure. It's actually a Merkaba, really, but I think it's related to that. I think it's how, doubling and doubling again, doubling again, doubling again, that's the basis of life.
So do you think it's kind of a shape that's source of life? It kind of represents source of life?
Well, no, the source of... it's a few generations. In other words, the cell has split and then split again, until you have 8 cells. And I think it's the tetrahedron comes up as a result of that process of being very fundamental.
So it's kind of fundamental...
it's geometry. It's like sacred geometry that's rooting us to our conception. Because we're coming from the field, the Akasha, consciousness, which is no space and time, into the material. So from the vortex into the toroid, into the material world. And significant, I think, that's accompanied by a flash of light.
That's very interesting.
And so, yeah, once you've gone through 3 generations, you've gone through a trinity of generations, you've got 8 cells.
And when you have deep experiences with this light, have you ever encountered any beings in that deep state?
Oh yeah. I feel I've been very blessed through my life again, not by design, just by following my heart, to receive, should we say, activations or initiations. And there's still to this day, you know, things show up that I'm totally not expecting. But I recognize this is something I need to do. So, for example, I was lying in the sarcophagus of the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza in 1999. And we were very lucky to be able to get in there because Hakeem was our guide, and he's featured in the Pyramid Code, if you ever watch that on YouTube. And he spoke the language of Kemet. He was the actually lineage holder of Kemet. And his house was right opposite the Sphinx. And as a boy, he was the one who discovered the tunnels connecting the pyramids. So he was an amazing, amazing man. When I lay in it, I can still see it now if I close my eyes. I was falling through space. I could see the stars falling, 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 falling. Exactly like I've experienced on the light. Interestingly enough, I've also experienced it with Pyro-Light glasses. So that was one thing. The visions I've had have been amazing, but you know, the Ajna Light, I was told, and it's true, I didn't develop it for myself. I developed it mainly to help, because I've had, you know, Shaktipat and Anti-Ma, Gurma, you know, many blessings along the way. And most people don't have those opportunities show up. You know, for younger people, there's not that much time left. You know, if you're not showing up, you're not going to be around, because Gaia's not going to put up with this bullshit much longer. And seriously, you know, how long can you go poisoning your own environment, poisoning your soul, you know, destroying everything around you, and then think you can be some transhumanist and turn into a robot and hop off the planet and then rinse and repeat? No, I don't think so. So, who knows what the future will bring? All I know is that if you want to be part of a clearing and spiritual revitalization of the planet, it's a duty to take seriously, but it's also a very rewarding and joyful journey. And it's one that takes a lot of self-observation. And for me, the only thing I have that I know that speaks the truth is my body. The mind certainly doesn't. The mind by its very nature is absolutely a liar. It has to be. It's a creative illusion. It's a filtering process through fractal recognition and pattern recognition to give approximations for something that's out there. The body, you abuse the body will do its best to take care of it, hide it until you break that limit. You break that limit, you're going to know about it. And recovering from that's very difficult. So, you know, medical school when I was 18, what I learned is I don't want to be on the receiving end of the system. My parents were birth doctors, you know, worked in the hospitals. No. So then I've just always looked after myself, done stuff that other people think is crazy. Like I started Ramadan 14 years ago. So I ate one meal a day after 6. Every single day after that, one meal a day after 6. Every single day. So I just flew to Chicago last weekend for the Pyramid Conference, which was a lot of fun. It's totally wacky. But it sort of sucks because there's a 12-hour time difference. So then I couldn't eat for 36 hours. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I don't mind. That's my commitment. And my body, I'm travel with a bowl. I go to Trader Joe's or somewhere. Or, actually, we went to the farmer's market, got some really good vegetables, and I ate one raw salad a day. Life is easy. My life isn't obsessing about food. I don't get a dopamine hit from food. But I'm not hungry. My blood sugar is really constant.
When you are having those experiences with Ajna Light, are you comfortable framing some of those dimensions and framing some of those experiences into different dimensions, like astral plane or fifth dimension, or is it? Would you?
Thank you for framing that question very respectfully, because there's a lot of New Age bullshit around people who don't understand physics and mathematics, and they use terms. Go back to Latin. Mensa, table, measuring. Table has 4 legs, 3 dimensions. That is a dimension. It's measured. And I think personally, to talk about higher fractals of reality as dimensions is a misuse of the word. Of course, as time goes on, the English language gets debased more and more, but that one sort of bothers me. I was at Manchester years ago, and oh God, I won't go into the name of the people, but now we're going up to God's love seat on the 33rd dimension, and tomorrow I'm going to take you to the 122nd dimension, and nobody's ever been there, and you have to come and show up at 7 o'clock in the morning. What the fuck? That kind of thing doesn't have meaning for me. There are layers of illusion, but ultimate truth is emptiness. The clear light. In Dzogchen, from the clear light comes virtually the 5 lights. It's the 4 elements. Plus the white light. So the white light is the ether. So the clear light is a magnetic field. It's a stillness. And I'm still learning a lot about that, but it's becoming clearer to me, at least in my own frame of reference. And so to jumble things up by thinking that hypercubes are somehow another dimension doesn't make any sense. Hypercube is just, John Dee first described it, it's just a fully connected cube. Cool. End of story. But there's a lot of very, very bizarre stuff. There's a misunderstanding of field theory, because materialists absolutely refuse to accept that there can be a field. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But that does happen. The field is fully connected. And longitudinal waves are real. They're the waves that travel faster than light. So I tend to avoid that kind of vocabulary, but I think there's another meaning that you have beneath that. So go ahead and tell me what the question is.
About grouping these different dimensions, because there are so many terminologies out there, and I've been researching on this so long, but I still it's not clear to me. That's why I wanted to get your perspective on.
Okay, so when the mind is involved and it's a mental process, people make up things because it's just oh, that sort of works for me. Yeah, I'll call it that. And then somebody else hears it and think, oh, that person's clever. He must know what he's talking about. And so that's what the mind does. It lies. It creates illusion. It creates nonsense. Occam's razor is about getting to the simplest. So I don't read anything. I do not research very, very deliberately, because the thing that's happened to you, that confusion, is because of lots of muddied minds, mental processes, all looking at the elephant and saying, well, this thing is a fan because it's the ear, and this thing is a brush because it's a tail. Yeah, they're all valid, but the essence is the elephant. And the essence is always simple. It's never complicated. So that's how you know. You'll feel, you won't analyze through thinking and logical argument. You will know in your heart the truth, and the truth is stillness. It's not all this monkey mind, it has to, you do this and then you have to do that, and then just, it's none of that. That's taking you further away from your heart. There's a key, actually, I would say, the key Taoist writing is called The Secret of the Golden Flower. And Carl Jung first translated it in the 1920s. And it follows the Taoist way of looking at the organs in the body. The emperor's in the heart. The general's in the liver. The general takes care of the heart. Okay? And then the servant is in the head. Materialism turns it upside down. This is God. The servant becomes God. When you put the servant in charge of the mansion, your being, the emperor leaves. It's like, well, I'm not hanging out here. People become cut here. This is the longest journey from knowledge to wisdom. And most people never ever go there. They go, I read all this book, and I read that, and I read this, and I can't remember that, but this. So what? If your feeling is in harmony with the essential truth of stillness, in other words, loving compassion and joy, which is the nature of the universe, otherwise none of us would exist. We're consciousness observing itself out of joy. That's our nature. There's no need to read anything. You just get more and more stories about, this has to be this color, and then you have to do this thing, and then it's just nonsense. And because everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but it's meaningless to anyone apart from that person, really. But when you get a group meditating together in stillness, the feeling in the room is a peaceful and joyful, still feeling, always. Same in a yoga class. I was teaching yoga. I was a yoga therapist. That was my teacher training. Silicon Valley. So I started, my teachers were both trained in the 70s by BKS Iyengar, so they were senior Iyengar teachers. And so that was sort of my starting point. But I ended up doing my own version of what became Yin Yoga. And I would do the whole class with my eyes closed. I would do all the poses with the group and talk them through it. Because in yoga therapy, you explain the movement so that a blind person can do the class. I never tell people to close their eyes, but when I look around, they're all eyes closed. We would do only 12 poses in an hour and a half. Very slow, peaceful. Now that wasn't at all appealing to the power yoga. I got to, get buff so I can impress the girls, those kind of people. I didn't care. I was giving people an entrainment in stillness so that the whole room into.
You explained it very beautifully, Guy.
Well, thank you for asking the question, because it's a key question. And I tuned into you to answer in words that felt, actually didn't feel like me talking, it felt like your spirit, higher being, talking to you through me. So I was just a channel.
And thank you for being that channel. It resonated with me.
It was beautiful. I could see you come into your center.
One question I had for you, and I think because of your tech background, you would have a really interesting perspective on this. What happens if our technology keeps progressing without integrating this mystic aspect? And let's say, like, some of these experiences we can have only when we tune into ourselves, like some of these experiences of remote viewing or things like that. But if we are able to do that using VR glasses, and we don't have to tune into our spirit anymore to do those kind of things, but it's missing that aspect of being in tune with yourself. Now you're using technology, you're using virtual reality to have that experience.
Except you're not. There's my entire life as a chip designer was simulation. I wrote very, very complex models of the chip, because the last chip I designed at Cisco, the NRE, the non-recurring engineering expenses to make the mask, $1 million. You make one mistake and you've blown $1 million. People are not very happy. All right, so that was in 2000, God knows what it is now. So a simulation is sterile. You want to have simulated sex or natural sex? Which do you prefer? You could do it with a vibrator, you know, watching a video. Maybe even get some of the ductless fans going and stuff like that, but all these things, demonic processes, are self-limiting by their very nature, because the universe doesn't support them. So the only issue is, are we along for the ride? If the dominant cultural influence is materialistic,
yeah,
and ironically, we both do and don't have it. We have no control, but we have infinite influence. And I think of Plato's cave. In Plato's cave, he said, you know, what we see is the shadow of the wall of reality, and that's what the ego sees, and that's what. And in the cave, the smallest light, you know, one little candle will illuminate the whole cave. So my way of looking at it is, if I work on myself, just working on myself to purify my channel with no goal in mind, but just, and it's a self-reinforcing, joyful thing. But if that's my focus, I'm not doing it because I want to make $1 million. I'm not doing it because I want to impress people. I'm not doing it because I feel empty inside. I'm doing it for its own sake. If I do that, then a light is being created. Now, other people, they're all individuals. They can choose to resonate with it or not. Right now, nobody's resonating because everyone's in fear, and they're manipulated by governments through, you know, the media and everything, deliberately to disempower them so they're easy to control, to build the hive thing. You know, it's the hive. By its very nature. So all we can't, no revolution will fix that. You'll just reinforce the fear-based paradigm, you know. We don't need to go down that rat hole, but it's very clear that if you fight the system, you make the system stronger. And I've never been interested in fighting anyone. everyone's entitled to their own thing. But if we polish the stone in our heart day after day after day in a way that's harmonious for us, which is individual and unique, we end up with a beautiful crystal, inevitably. But it's just not a quick fix. If you want a quick fix, oh, I'm going to fix the world. No, you're not. You're going to make it worse. I'm going to fix the environment. No, you're not. You're going to make it worse. But if you go into your land with love, then you are doing something for Gaia. And we are the cells of Gaia. It just so happens that most of Gaia's cells have cancer. But there are very encouraging signs going on. And that's why I think we're at the extreme of negativity now. And a lot of the prophecies, which could have completely toasted us and should have done, like, you know, Mayan calendar and all that stuff, any number of asteroids. There's some, I think, it's just my feeling, there's some destiny that we have to return to the golden age. And technology is a tool. It's a beautiful tool. Like the Firestone of Atlantis. You know, it powered everything in Atlantis. But it's based on love. And then when they moved out of that into the beginning of, you know, the fall, into the beginning of Kali Yoga, if you like, they moved out into fighting and attacking other people, blah, blah, blah. And that's just a cycle. The cycle occurs in many ways. My sense is the tiniest effort to be in love and compassion and peace without ownership and grasping of other people and controlling of other people. In other words, this is my boyfriend, this is my wife, this is my child. If you leave that alone and you're in service to the people you're in relationship to without giving your power away, then there's infinite hope.
I agree.
Good. I thought you you're that kind of person too. So, Suma, thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. You know, we've never spoken before, but I knew we were old friends already.
Yeah, I thought that this interview would be very comfortable for me because I don't know, I had that sense with you as if I know you, and maybe it's also our background. I also work in technology, but I'm so interested in spirituality and mysticism, so we have a lot in common.
Well, I'll give you one tip. I used to have crystals in my cube at Cisco. This is in like 95, 96. Everyone thought I was weird. But I'm telling you, people would come and lie down in my cube. They could feel it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm hoping we can talk another time. My battery's getting a bit low.
Okay.
But I think we had it was a wonderful conversation, and thank you for who you are.
Same here. Thank you. And if people want to find out more about you, they can go to ajnalight.com.
And pyralight.com. So PYRALIGHT.com. And or just Guy Harriman. You'll see me on Facebook and the Ajna Light community Facebook groups. There we do Facebook Live every Saturday. Up to about 400 or 500 people watching. It's quite fun.
Thank you so much for being generous with your time, Guy. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. In LA.
Yeah, it sounds like you'll be here in February.
Yes, yeah, I just booked. I've got my table now at the Conscious Life at the LAX Hilton.
I would love to come over and say hi.
Yeah, come. We'll have fun.
Okay. Take care.
Okay.
I'll talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.